Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And yes, I'm here for yet another food storage video. And today I'm going to be talking about grains, flours, and more. So I'll be talking about the types of grains I store, why I store them, and how I store them, plus a few other things that are related to grains. All right, the first thing I would like to talk about are noodles, stocking up on noodles. Yes, I know that I mentioned these in that first video that's a part of this series on food storage beyond rice and beans, which I highly recommend you go check out because of all the things I cover in that, but I still don't get to cover everything, so this is why I'm doing some of these breakdowns. But I wanted to bring up the noodle thing again for a few reasons. So the noodles I like to store, I like to stock up on now are the organic ones that you can get from Costco. I really like these because they are not only organic, they are also a product of Italy, which when it comes to noodles, I trust that better. And the other reason why is because when you get these at Costco like this, they are an excellent price. It's the best price I've seen on organic noodles anywhere. And they're in individual packages, and each package is over 17.5 ounces. So that's a lot bigger than your standard package you're going to buy in your grocery store, and especially bigger than the standard organic ones, because usually your standard package in a grocery store is going to be about a pound, and the organic ones are usually around 12 ounces. So they're not only bigger than your standard non-organic noodles, they're much bigger than your standard organic noodles. So this is the best deal. I recommend this. We get both this variety pack of noodles like this. They have they have 3 different shapes in here. And also I get the spaghetti noodles, and then sometimes I'll buy these ones too where they have the different colors, you know, made with carrots and spinach and whatever else they use in there. Now here's the main thing why I wanted to bring this up again about the stocking up on noodles, is that though yes, you can easily make noodles from scratch as long as you have all the ingredients in storage, because really all you need to make noodles are eggs and flour. That's it. That's all you need. And I have a few different noodle making videos out. I do plan on doing some more, and I do like making noodles. It is a fun process, but it can be time consuming. So in a major grid down situation, you're not going to probably want to do that. You're going to want to fall back on your noodle stores, because things are going to get a lot busier and harder, and so you're going to want to simplify things. So having a stash of noodles on hand is really, I think, is a really important investment. On top of that, I think if you were to do a cost comparison to buying noodles like this in bulk to buying and storing a good organic semola flour, I think you'll find out you're not as far ahead cost-wise as you might think you are. But even if you are, again, anything you can do that's going to simplify your life in a major grid down situation, I think is important, and really it's a pretty decent price. And I've said I do a lot of my Costco ordering online because we live quite a ways from the closest Costco. So their organic noodles, both the spaghetti style and this style, are ones that you can order online. I can't remember if I got these ones online or in the store. I think I got these ones in the store. I don't know if they're available online. I can't remember, but you can check it out. So, and yes, somebody asked me, when it comes to ordering from Costco online, you don't have to have a membership. They do add a 5% charge though if you're not a member, but weigh out the costs, look at what you've got, and then do your price per pound on the various things you're going to buy. You're probably going to find out you're still money ahead to go ahead and pay that 5%, and maybe even more money ahead by not getting the membership. Sometimes it's worth it because it costs money for a yearly membership. If you do the executive membership and you spend enough money there in a year, you can actually earn enough of a percentage back to pay for your membership, and then that really makes it worth it. But if you can't do that, then it may not be worth it. It may just be worth it to purchase online without a membership and pay that extra 5%. One of the other things about noodles like this is you really don't have to vacuum seal them in jars. If you're concerned about them being stored in the plastic, that's the only reason I would say go ahead and vacuum seal them in jars. But they will last for years in a package just like this. I know this because I've left them in packages like this for a long time. Even though I have a lot of jars right now, I'm not wanting to conserve my jars for putting up other things that I'm more concerned about having with their shelf life. And I know these noodles are going to be fine just like this for years. As long as they're kept in a cool, dry area, they're going to be perfectly fine. Okay, now let's talk just a little bit about beans before I go on to the grains. Beans are something that we'll store for an pretty much indefinite amount of time. However, there is an issue with dried beans like I have here. These are from my garden from 2018. So the ones that I save up from my own garden, I do vacuum seal into jars like this and then work through them. The ones I buy in big bags. I keep in the Gamma Seal buckets, and I try to work through those a little quicker. And if I can't, then I start canning them up like I did here. Because here's the issue with beans. Yes, they can store for pretty much an indefinite amount of time. However, the problem with beans is that they will keep getting harder and harder and harder and harder over time until they get to a point that no amount of soaking or cooking them is going to fully soften them up. You're still going to have kind of a gritty, dry bean. And so it's best to try to work through them rather quickly or can them up like I did here. So what I do, I still have a lot of kidney beans, pinto beans, and black beans in storage that are dry. And so every time I make a big batch of chili that I want to can up for an instant meal, then I will fill in any gaps with some pre-soaked kidney beans or black beans or even pinto beans so that I can have those ready to go when I want to make something like the kidney beans I would use in a tamale pie. Or the black beans, you can make a really good spicy soup with that. Throw in the black beans and any of your other canned vegetables that you have and make a really yummy, canned tomatoes and stuff, and make a really wonderful soup. It's kind of similar to a chili, but it has a different flavor. I have a recipe for it. One of these days I should do a video on it because I haven't actually made it in a long time. Back when I was a vegan, because the store-bought garden burgers they're full of garbage. In fact, if you're vegan and you're buying that stuff, read the ingredients. You're not helping yourself out health-wise by being a vegan if that's what you're eating. But I would make my own garden patties and make them all natural by using black beans as a base to that. And those turned out pretty good. I never did fully perfect it to the point where they would hold together really well when being grilled, but they tasted pretty good. A lot of people, what they like to do when they get their bags of beans or grains in, they like to freeze them first for like a 24-hour period, because what that's going to do is that's going to kill any eggs that may be, any bug eggs, especially like weevils that may be in the beans or the grains. This can happen. We did have it happen with a bag of spelt, because I personally don't do that. Some of it is just a time issue, and some of it to me is my concern is how do I know when the beans and the rice and the other grains, if I freeze them and then pull them out, you're going to still have to allow them to dry for a period of time before you can jar them up, and because you don't want to jar them up if there's any moisture in there, because then they're going to mold. And so I just put my things in, for the things I'm going to have for long-term storage, I put them in the big 5-gallon Mylar bags, and then I'll put in some oxygen absorbers. It's the only time I use oxygen absorbers. And then I take my flat iron that I bought years ago when I thought I would try straightening my very, very curly hair, and it's too much of a pain. I don't bother with it. But I find out that flat iron works really good for sealing those bags. So I get as much air as I can out manually, but also have those oxygen absorbers in there. Seal that off really good. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about popcorn. As you can see, this is a small bag. It's just currently what I'm trying out. It is actually one of the better deals I have found on organic popcorn. Now, all popcorn is non-GMO, but not all of it is organic. And when it comes to corns and your grains, these are the areas that I think is really important to go organic as much as you possibly can. And it's really hard to find a good price on organic corn. Now, the best price I believe I've seen so far is Azure Standard. I have done a few orders. We do not currently have a drop point anywhere near us. I don't know if we ever will. We've tried to set one up here in our small, very remote town, but they turned us down. I still will order from them, but shipping can be expensive. However, when you look at the price comparison of what you're paying with shipping plus getting a good quality organic item, you can still end up money ahead. However, I'm not going to do that until I'm ready to do a bigger order, because it's going to save a little bit of money on shipping if I can order more at a time. So I'm trying to restock my popcorn supply, even though we have quite a bit. And so I still like to hunt around and try different things. And so one of the ones I've been getting is this one. I haven't actually tried it yet. I just got this in the other day through Subscribe and Save. Now, I know this is a small bag, but it was a bulk purchase because you get 6 of these bags at a time. And it was the better price that I could find on Amazon. Plus, I could get it through Subscribe and save even more by doing that. So I'm trying this one out, but that doesn't mean I'm going to rule out buying some from Azure Standard next time I do my order for grains, because that is my favorite place now to buy my grains. And because they have an excellent price on all their, all the ancient grains, all of that, that even when I have to pay shipping, I still come out money ahead getting those, and I can get the ones I really want. And so, but popcorn is an excellent thing to store for many reasons, and one being is that it has an incredibly long, I would say indefinite shelf life, even if not properly stored, like in Mylar bags and sealed up with oxygen absorbers. In fact, that's pretty much pointless when it comes to popcorn, because they have found popcorn that was like 8,000 years old that still popped, and in some ancient tomb somewhere. But here's the other thing about popcorn, that if you really enjoy eating popcorn, which we do, but you also want to have a corn that's good to grind up for making flours and meals, popcorn is your choice. And it's something that you can store up. You don't have to store a zillion different kinds of corn. You can just store up popcorn, and you can have your popcorn for a treat, and you can also have it for grinding into flours and meals. And so that's one of the reasons why I stock up on popcorn. However, one of the other corns I do like to stock up on that I get from Azure Standard is their whole white organic corn. And of course, it's non-GMO. And because it's hard for me to find an organic non-GMO white cornmeal like I have here. This is the ground corn. This is after we've ground it in our Country Living grain mill, and you can see my big jar is starting to get low, so it's time here soon for us to start grinding up more corn. And when we do that, we're going to grind up the corn from our own garden, the popcorn that I have, plus the white corn, because the white corn in particular is what Patrick really likes for when I make the more hillbilly style beans and cornbread. And some of you know what I'm talking about. Tar Heel beans and cornbread is what we call it, because Patrick's dad was a Tar Heel. He came from North Carolina, and so that's what Patrick grew up on. And so I had to learn how to make that the hillbilly style, which is a little different than the type of beans and cornbread we have here in the north, which I grew up with. So anyway, I do stock up on that because of the white corn. And then the popcorn that I've grown, the glass gem, that makes a pretty good meal too, and we've done that. It turns out a little bit of a grayish purple kind of color, almost lavender, but when it's cooked up, it actually has a nice look to it. You add the egg and stuff in there, and it adds more color, and it turns out just fine. Right here you can see these are my grains that are ready to grind into flour. I keep them in a jar like this right next to my Country Living grain mill, and it's a blend. And right now my current blend, you should be able to see even better in the picture right there, that I have 3 different grains in here. What I have in here are some emmer grains that I bought because I wanted to try them out. These are the darkest ones. I have some spelt grains, and then mostly hard white wheat. My favorite grain for making breads with is the hard white wheat. It has a very mild flavor, but I do like the emmer, and I do really like the einkorn. And it's one of those things I'm waiting to purchase. I'd only bought like a small bag of it from Azure Standard to try it, just like the emmer. And I plan on buying more when I do my next big order from them. But really, when it comes down to it, my 2 favorites to blend together are the spelt and the hard white wheat. Now you got to find out what works for you. I'm always trying new things, but I don't like to have a zillion different types of grains stored up. I just want to keep trying different grains and store up what I know I like best and I'm going to use. Now a soft white wheat is also a nice grain to have, but once I've worked through the one I had, it's got a nice flavor, it's a great grain, but here's what I don't like about soft white wheat, or even the spelt when it comes to that, is that it takes much longer for them to grind, whether you're doing it by hand or you're doing it with a motor. And I've done it both ways. Our Country Living grain mill is made to be a hand crank, but we also have it hooked up to a motor, so to save me some time. And hard white wheat goes through the mill a lot faster. It's harder to grind, especially when you're doing it by hand, but it goes through faster and it cleans and it keeps it cleaned out better. That's why I don't like the softer grains. So that's what you're looking at when you're doing the einkorn, the emmer, the soft white wheat, and the spelt. And this is why when I do my blend like this, I always go with a much higher ratio of the hard white wheat, because I find when I do that, it goes through at a nice pace. And if you're doing it by hand, it's not as hard as doing, it's not as hard to crank as it is just doing the hard white wheat, but it doesn't take as long to go through as the softer grains. The softer grains, you could be doing this forever. It's easy. You can turn the crank easily enough. It just takes a long time. And so that's one reason I like to do a blend like that. Now, some people might wonder, well, what's the difference between hard and soft grains? When it comes to making your breads, typically you're looking at your hard grains as being something you're going to use in your yeast type breads, where your softer grains you're going to use in something like your biscuits, your pie crusts, and your tortillas and stuff like that. But you know what? I find I like the hard white wheat just as good in any of them. It works great for me in all of them. I don't really see a big difference. Now, how I store my wheat grains, my rice for long term is, like I mentioned, in the Gamma Seal bucket, in the large bucket, in the Mylar bags with an oxygen absorber, and then sealed with a flat iron. Now, for the buckets that I'm working through immediately, they just go right into the Mylar bag. And I always toss in, this goes for my oats as well, because I store oats too. I just throw in a few bay leaves into every bag. What that's going to do is that's going to help prevent weevils and other bugs. They don't like the smell of bay leaves, and so by tossing those in there, that will help to prevent any kind of issue. Now, in all the years I've been storing grains, I've only had one bucket ever get full of weevils, and thankfully they stayed contained because they were in a Gamma Seal. And I had actually been working through it, and so I didn't have it all vacuum sealed and all that because I was actually working through the bag. I'm pretty sure that the weevils were already in the grains when I got them. So that was a situation where if I would have frozen it first, it might already had the eggs in there, and then eggs hatched and then they started populating. And once it got to that point, there was no saving it. They were gone. So all of that ended up getting fed to the chickens, which was great because they got the grains and they got all the protein from the bugs. They loved that. But really, in all the other times that I've been storing grains, I've never had weevils other than that one time. And so just keep putting those bay leaves in there and make sure you seal everything very well that's going to go into long-term storage. Again, consider the freezing thing like some people do. Okay, let's talk about a few of the other types of things I store grain-wise. Cereals, when I can get them for a good price, the organic cereals, though I don't stock highly on these. And the reason why is because organic cereals can be pretty expensive. One of the things I like about this brand is it's actually this is all from Washington State, and so this is really close, and I can get a fairly decent price on these compared to some other ones, but it's still just a small little box. Now, Nature's Path does make some good ones in the bigger bags that are, you can get a better price on those per pound or per ounce. The other reason why I don't care to stock heavily up on these, I see the prepackaged cereals like this, organic or not, as being more of an extra treat. because we have lots of oats. I do make a hot cereal from the grains I already have. I have a video on that. I'll go ahead and link down below. And so basically it's kind of a cream of wheat type cereal. So I have ways that I can make cereal with that. And then there's so many other ways to make a good hot breakfast, whether it be pancakes, biscuits and gravy, or just bacon, eggs, and fried potatoes. That's one that we do quite a bit around here. The box cereals are more just to break things up and just add more variety. However, if we had to, we could live without these. And you know, if money was to get really, really tight, then I would just forego buying these altogether, because it's more of a luxury item. That's the word I was looking for. However, if having box cereals is important to you, there's always the option of vacuum sealing them into your jars. I've done this before when I found really good deals and I bought it in bulk, where I could buy like a case of cereals like this. And then I just took them, and especially when you get them in the big bags. And I realize I show this in pretty much every food storage video, but there's always new people coming in, and it's always good to, that, you know, if you've never seen this before, it's one way you can store up your food. And I use a brake bleeder, the Food Saver tops. You can also use your regular Food Saver. I didn't even notice this until other people mentioned it, that theirs is doing that. If your brake bleeder is not calibrated to the 0 like it should be, because whatever happened, just go ahead and pump it up to about 20 if you can go that far, just to make sure. If it's right on 0, pump it up to at least 15 to 16 or 17 psi. And so what that's going to do, and when you're dealing with a bigger jar like this, half-gallon jar, it's going to take a little bit longer to pump it up. And I have a lot more airspace in there because it didn't fully fill up the jar. And cereal is so lightweight anyway that it's going to, there's just a lot of air space in there. This is a good way to store up your cereals for a long period of time. And I'm actually only doing this for demonstration purposes because, like I said, it's not something I typically will stock a lot of. Okay, so there we go. Jar is sealed. Now you can put a band on it and put it in your storage. Here's some semola flour. I did stock up on this just in case I do want to make pasta. I thought, and also because I like buying in bulk anyway, because you get a better price. And so this is vacuum sealed. Now if you look close, you can see right in there, that's a paper towel. This is just one of the things I recommend. You can do a coffee filter, a paper towel, or even a cloth, just a cotton cloth. Whenever you're vacuum sealing anything powdery like this into a jar, it's best to put something like this on top of whatever it is you have in here before you put on your lid and vacuum seal it, because your powdery items are going to get sucked up either into your hose and possibly ruin your machine, especially if you're using a Food Saver, or it's going to get sucked out through the sides, and then it's not going to seal anyway. I made that mistake trying to vacuum seal a bunch of cacao powder into jars in the past and just didn't even think about it. But anyway, having something in there as a barrier to keep that from going up there is going to make a huge difference. So paper towel, coffee filter, or better yet, I think if you're like me and you save up a lot of little squares of cotton cloth for using to cover your vinegars and whatnot, then that's something you can put in there, and that way you can always reuse it. You know, the paper towels and the coffee filters aren't as reusable. And I'm not sure why I didn't think about this when I vacuum sealed this in here, but this is actually from 2018. I haven't made noodles in quite a while, though I do have another jar of the flour somewhere. And then for rice, somebody was asking me about where do you find organic rice that's grown in America. I actually don't know. I don't know if I've ever seen organic white rice from America. It might be out there somewhere. The organic rice I've been getting is actually from India, and I can get it sometimes on Costco for a pretty decent price. And whenever I see it available online, I buy some more. And we do have quite a bit of white rice in storage, but anyway, that's the one I'm liking, and I'll go ahead and show you a picture of it right here. That's what it looks like. It used to be in a different looking bag. It's the same rice as now in a different bag. But anyway, it seems to come and go quite a bit at Costco. But another rice I don't stock up a whole lot on, but I like to have some on hand, is a wild rice blend. And this is the Lundberg rice. And I get this from Amazon through Subscribe and Save. If you're interested, I'll link to that one down below. This is the one I like to use to make the stuffing for my turkey, a wild rice stuffing. That always seems to go over well, which is also a good option for people who are gluten-free. And I have a recipe video on that. That's a 2-3 years old that I'll go ahead and link to down below. And then the oats you can, again, that's something you can get from Azure Standard, especially if a drop point, you can get a good price there, organic, non-GMO, or the ones I'm trying out right now that I've been getting are the Great River Milling. They have some really good grains that you can get through Amazon. It's not cheap, but it's not too bad of a price, especially if you go through Subscribe and Save. That's going to help. And I've been using some of their stuff often on their various grains. That's where I got my soft white wheat grains, was from Great River Milling. Since we're talking about grains, the other thing I need to mention is stocking up on things for leavening your breads. Now I did stock up on baking powder. This is actually several years old. It's still good. This is the second bag. I have another bag like this. And so this is something I do store in Mylar bags. And somebody asked me on one of my last food storage videos, why don't you use Mylar bags? Well, I do. I just don't use them as often as jars. But the nice thing about Mylar bags is they can be stored flatter, and you know, whether they're full or not, you know, they're not going to take up quite as much room. You can put quite a bit in them. They have their own issues. There's certain things I like better about glass, and there's certain things I like better about Mylar. Knowing what I know now, one of the things I'm starting to do, even though I still have a lot of baking powder to work through, is that you can make your own baking powder, and having the ingredients to make the baking powder is actually better, because then you can make just a little bit at a time instead of having a big batch like this, because apparently it's supposed to be more shelf stable having the ingredients separately. And that's going to be some kind of starch. I always try to stay away from cornstarch because it's another one that's hard to find organic. So I usually have either arrowroot powder or tapioca starch, or both on hand. And then you'll need some cream of tartar. One of the reasons I like to buy Frontier brand or Star West of anything is they already come in Mylar bags. So I just store them like this. I store them in the bags that they're in because they're already in Mylar. So all their spices and stuff I get through them. I keep them in the bags until I go to open them up and then put them in the jars that I'm using where I'm working through them right away. So cream of tartar is something I've been stocking up on because of that. And then also you have to have baking soda. Cream of tartar and the baking soda, these are things that will store very well. I'm working on building up the cream of tartar supply so that when I'm done with this, then I'll just start making my own baking powder with the ingredients I have on hand. So that's the benefit there. That's why they say it's better to stock up on the ingredients needed to make the baking powder than the baking powder itself is all about shelf life. So, but like I said, I've had it for years, still good, still good. I've never had baking powder go bad on me, well, at least not that I can recall. I've had yeast go bad, you know, yeast that I stored, but I always store my yeast once, I store it back in the pantry as long as the packages are still sealed, vacuum sealed in their own little Mylar bags. But once I open them, I store the yeast in little glass jars in my freezer and work through them that way. Because once you've opened it, it will eventually get to a point where it's no good and you won't be able to get a rise out of your bread. But there's also other things you can do for yeast. You can do sourdough, or you can do, like I have videos where I did mess around a little bit with my fermentation starter and managed to get a few pretty good successful loaves of bread. It's a little trickier, it takes a longer time, so I still like to fall back on the dry yeast, but at least I know I have ways of making a yeast bread if I never have access to a dry yeast. So I'm totally cool with that. So anyway, think about your leavens and the things that you need. And of course, as I've mentioned before, salt is going to be an important thing to have on hand. So stock up on your salts, like your Himalayan pink salt, your Redmond real salt, and a couple others that I like to have on hand. I have a whole video just on salts, the salts that I like to stock up on, because there's at least 4 that I do. There's 2 main ones, and then there's 2 others I like to have on hand. And so I'll link to that video down below if you're interested more about salt and why I stock up on these different ones and how I use them, because they all have their own various uses. I do stock up on unbleached organic white flour. I think that, you know, even though I do like grinding grinding the grains and making our own flour that way, I do think it's important to have some regular unbleached organic white flour on hand. You can get a good one from Azure Standard, and also Costco has been carrying one of my favorite brands of the organic unbleached white flour. They actually are carrying in the store. I can't get it online, but when I go in there, and it's a really good price. I think it's the best price I've seen on that kind of flour. So do that too. Get your Gamma Seal buckets, put it in there, your Mylar bags, and then as you can see here, I have these buckets here. These are the ones that stay in my cupboard right down here that I'm always working through. Those, and then I refill them. When they get empty, I go back to my pantry, I refill those, bring them back out here. So that's what's going on here. But I do like to do blends of the wheat, the whole wheat flour with the white flour. There's just some things that are going to turn out a little bit better, and you're able to work a little bit better when you've got your white flour to go with it. But using just the whole grain flours from the food store, you know, from the ones we grind ourselves, I've done that too. I've made yeast spreads with just fully whole grains, and they turn out really good. It just depends on what I'm making. Now, one of the things I wanted to say about grinding your own flour and why it's important to have a grain mill and have grains stored is that your grains are, your whole grains are going to, they're going to hold all their benefits. They're going to store longer and better, and they're going to have all the good stuff in it that you're not going to get from your store-bought flours. Even if you buy a whole grain flour, there's still stuff missing from it because they have to remove the healthy fats so that they will store for a longer period of time, at least until you can buy it. They can't put it on the shelf like that. They have to take the fat out or it will go rancid. So when you have your grains, you're going to be able to get that healthy fat. You're going to have a better, more nutritious flour, and then you just grind the flour up as you need it. And whenever I do that, if I grind more than I need, I either stick it in the freezer, the ground flour, or I stick it in the fridge, depending on how soon I think I'm going to use it, to prevent it from going rancid. But anyway, you just grind up what you need. And this is why this is important to have whole grains stored up and not just flour, because of the length of time and the benefits you're going to get from those, all the nutrients that you lose when you get your store-bought flour. So, and also a lot of people who have had gluten problems found simply by switching to, I know this doesn't apply to everyone, but simply by switching to buying the grains whole and organic and grinding them themselves, they found they stopped having issues with the gluten or with grains in general. So that's something to consider there if you're one of those. I realize that's not going to solve everybody's problem. Some people find then going the next step of soaking and drying the grains and then grinding them up has helped. And then some people go yet the next step and they sprout them and then dry them and then grind them up into flour. So it's all the steps are going to depend on what you need. Okay, well, I hope you're enjoying my series on food storage, or my newer series. So any thoughts that you'd like to add to this, anything I may have forgot or left out, or maybe I don't do, any tips or pointers that you have for other people you'd like to share, go ahead and put those in comments down below. And also share with us, what are your favorite grains to store up? Do you like to store oats, wheat grains, corn? What is? Thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.